It's 2 a.m., the air conditioner dies mid-cycle. The refrigerator stops humming. Every light in your house blinks out at once, and in that split second of total silence, you realize something terrifying. The grid just failed. No warning, no explanation, just darkness, heat, and the faint sound of car alarms starting to wail in the distance. Now here's the part that separates the living from the statistics. Most people think they're ready. They've got flashlights in the junk drawer, bottled water under the sink, maybe even a portable generator sitting in the garage collecting dust. But here's the brutal truth. 90% of people won't last 72 hours in a prolonged blackout. Not because they didn't prepare, but because they prepared wrong. They bought the expensive toys, the gear that looks good on Instagram, the stuff survival influencers get paid to push. And when the power actually dies, all that shiny equipment becomes dead weight. Because that generator? Useless without fuel you didn't stockpile. Those fancy tactical flashlights? Dead in 6 hours when the batteries run out and stores are already looted. The high-tech water purifier needs electricity you don't have anymore. This is why we're cutting through the noise. No gimmicks, no $500 solutions, just 12 items that actually matter when everything stops working. Cheap, practical, and brutally effective. The kind of gear that keeps you alive while everyone else is fighting over the last gallon of water at a gas station that can't pump anymore. And item number 11, it's the one almost nobody thinks about until heat stroke is already setting in. Let's get into it. Most people don't realize how fast the water stops. They think when the power goes out, the tap just keeps running. Wrong. In most urban and suburban areas, water treatment plants and pump stations rely entirely on electricity. No power means no pressure means no flow, and depending on your local infrastructure, that tap could run dry within hours, not days. Suddenly, that bottled water stash you thought was impressive, those 12 bottles in the pantry, they're gone in 24 hours for a family of 4. 1 gallon per person per day is the survival minimum. And that's just for drinking. Forget cooking. Forget hygiene. Forget flushing toilets. You're in pure conservation mode, and you're already losing. This is where most preppers make their first fatal mistake. They stockpile water but have no way to replenish it. They assume the blackout will be temporary. 3 days max. A week if it's really bad. But what happens when it's not? What happens when it stretches into 2 weeks, a month, or longer? Your stored water runs out, and suddenly you're staring at a pond, a stream, or rainwater runoff, knowing that drinking it raw could put you in worse shape than dehydration. That's why item number 1 isn't just water. It's a gravity-fed water filter or a manual hand pump system. These don't need batteries. They don't need electricity. They don't need anything except physics and your own 2 hands. A gravity filter like a Berkey or a DIY bucket setup with ceramic filters can process thousands of gallons. You pour dirty water in the top and clean, drinkable water comes out the bottom. No power, no moving parts that break, just reliable, life-saving filtration. And if you're near a water source like a well, a manual hand pump becomes your lifeline. Electric well pumps die the second the grid fails. But a manual pump, the kind that's been used for centuries, keeps working as long as you can move your arm. It's not fast. It's not convenient. But it works. And in survival, working beats convenient every single time. Now let's talk storage, because filtering water is only half the equation. You need something to put it in. And no, a few empty milk jugs aren't going to cut it. Milk jugs degrade. They crack. They leak. They're not food grade for long-term use. What you need are dedicated water storage containers. Stackable 5-gallon jugs, collapsible water bladders, or those big blue 55-gallon barrels. The kind that can sit in your garage or basement for months without turning into a science experiment. Here's the math that most people ignore. One person needs 1 gallon per day minimum. That's for drinking and basic hygiene. A family of 4 needs 4 gallons daily. Over a 2-week blackout, that's 56 gallons. 56. And if it's summer and you're sweating through your clothes every hour, double that number. Suddenly, those 12 bottles don't look so impressive anymore, do they? But here's the kicker. Even if you've got the containers, even if you've got the filter, you need to know where your water is coming from. Is there a creek within walking distance? A pond? A neighbor's pool you could negotiate access to? Because in a real grid-down scenario, every water source becomes contested territory. The people who waited too long, the ones who didn't prep, they'll be crowding every fountain, every stream, every place where water still flows. And desperation makes people dangerous. That's why the smart preppers, the ones who last, they've already mapped their water sources. They know where to go when the taps run dry. They've tested their filters beforehand, not in the middle of a crisis when there's no time to figure out why the flow rate is slow or why the water still tastes off. They've done the work before the lights went out. And when chaos hits, they're hydrated, calm, and ready while everyone else is panicking in line at a store that's been emptied for days. Item number 3, light. Let's be brutally honest. Darkness doesn't just hide threats. It destroys you psychologically. When the sun sets and you're sitting in total blackness, no phone glow, no streetlights bleeding through the windows, no refrigerator hum to remind you civilization still exists, your brain starts to unravel. Fear creeps in. Every sound becomes a threat. Every shadow, a person. And sleep? Forget it. You're too wired, too anxious, too aware that you're vulnerable. This is why light isn't a luxury in a blackout. It's a psychological anchor. It's the thing that keeps you sane when everything else is falling apart. But here's where most people screw it up. They grab the flashlight from the junk drawer, the one with the half-dead batteries that's been sitting there since 2019. Or they've got one of those tactical flashlights that's bright enough to signal aircraft but drains batteries in 90 minutes. And when those batteries die, and they will, you're back in the dark with nothing. That's why you don't rely on battery-powered lights alone. You need lights that recharge themselves. Solar-powered lanterns, hand-crank flashlights, lights that don't care if the grid is down because they were never plugged into it in the first place. A good solar lantern costs maybe $20 to $30. You set it in a sunny window during the day, and at night it gives you hours of soft, steady light. No batteries to replace. No panic when it dies because you just recharge it again tomorrow. And if it's cloudy for days, that's where the hand-crank lights come in. 60 seconds of cranking gives you 10 to 15 minutes of light. Not ideal, not fun. But when it's pitch black and you need to see, you'll crank that handle until your arm burns. Now let's talk about candles, because everyone thinks they're prepared with a couple of decorative candles from the clearance aisle. Wrong. Those little scented tea lights? They'll burn for 2, maybe 3 hours max. And when they're gone, you're done. What you need are emergency candles. The kind designed for power outages, long-burn candles that last 120 hours per candle. Thick, unscented, utilitarian. The kind that pioneers and sailors used because they worked. Stack a dozen of these and you've got over 1,000 hours of light. That's 40+ days of several hours of light each night. Pair them with some basic candle holders or lanterns, and suddenly you've got a lighting system that doesn't depend on the sun, batteries, or the grid. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people never test their lights. They buy them, toss them in a drawer, and assume they'll work when needed. Then the blackout hits, and they realize the solar panel is cracked, the crank mechanism is jammed, or the candles are so old they crumble when you try to light them. Don't be that person. Test your lights now. Burn a candle for an hour and see how it performs. Crank your flashlight and see if it actually holds a charge. Leave your solar lantern in the sun and check if it still glows at night. Because in the dark, when fear is setting in and your kids are asking why the lights won't come back on, you don't want to be fumbling with gear that doesn't work. You want to flip a switch, light a wick, or crank a handle and know, with absolute certainty, that you've got light. And that certainty, that confidence, that's what keeps you from breaking when everyone else does. Item number 5, food without electricity. Let's talk about what actually happens to your food when the power dies. That refrigerator full of meat, dairy, and leftovers? You've got about 4 hours before it starts climbing into the danger zone. Maybe 24 hours if you keep the door shut and pray. After that, it's a ticking time bomb of bacteria and spoilage. And that freezer? 2 days if it's packed tight. Less if you keep opening it to check. Most people panic and start cooking everything at once, thinking they'll eat it all before it spoils. But here's the problem. You can't cook without power. Your electric stove is dead. Your microwave is a paperweight. And that gas stove you're counting on? If it has an electric ignition, it's useless too. Even if you light it manually, most residential gas lines rely on electric pumps somewhere upstream. No power means no gas flow in many areas. So what do you do when your fridge is full of rotting food and you can't cook anyway? You need item number 5, a portable camping stove or an alcohol burner. These are small, cheap, and brutally effective. A basic single-burner camping stove runs on butane canisters that cost a couple bucks each. One canister gives you about 60 to 90 minutes of burn time, enough to boil water, cook rice, heat soup, or fry some canned meat. Stack a dozen canisters and you've got weeks of cooking capability. No electricity, no gas line, just twist, light, and cook. Alcohol burners are even simpler. You pour in denatured alcohol or isopropyl, light it, and you've got a clean, odorless flame. They're lightweight, packable, and nearly indestructible. The kind of thing you can toss in a bag and forget about until you need it. But here's the math people ignore. Cooking burns fuel fast. If you're boiling water 3 times a day for coffee, pasta, and cleaning, that's 30 to 45 minutes of burn time daily. Over 2 weeks, you're looking at 7 to 10 hours of fuel consumption. That means you need to stockpile not just the stove, but the fuel to run it. Butane canisters, alcohol bottles, even sterno cans, those little jellied fuel tins that burn for 2+ hours each. Stock them deep. Stock them now. Because when the power's out and the gas is off, these little canisters become more valuable than gold. But fuel is only part of the equation. You also need food that doesn't require refrigeration or complex cooking. Canned goods, obviously, but also rice, pasta, dried beans, oats, peanut butter, honey. Foods that last indefinitely when stored properly and cook fast when you need them to. The people who survive blackouts aren't the ones with freezers full of steaks. They're the ones with pantries full of boring, unglamorous staples that keep them fed day after day when everyone else is scraping by. And here's the brutal truth. In a prolonged blackout, hunger doesn't hit on day 1. It hits on day 5 when the adrenaline fades and you realize the stores aren't reopening. That's when the people who didn't prep start knocking on doors, asking for food, trading things they shouldn't, doing things they wouldn't. And that's when you'll be glad you stocked the stove, the fuel, and the food that doesn't need a working grid to become a meal. Item number 7, cooling without air conditioning. Here's a fact most people don't think about until it's too late. Heat kills faster than hunger. In a summer blackout, when the AC dies and the temperature inside your house climbs into the 90s, then the 100s, your body starts breaking down. Heat exhaustion, heat stroke, dehydration. And if you're elderly, a child, or have any medical conditions, your window of survival shrinks fast. This is why cooling isn't optional. It's critical. But how do you stay cool when there's no electricity? Most people think they'll just tough it out. Open the windows, use a hand fan. That works for about 6 hours. Then the heat becomes unbearable, sleep becomes impossible, and your body starts cannibalizing itself trying to regulate temperature. That's where item number 7 comes in. A high-capacity cooler and reusable ice packs. Not the little styrofoam box you take to the beach. A real cooler. The kind that's thick-walled, rubber-sealed, and designed to hold ice for days, not hours. Pair it with chemical ice packs or frozen water bottles, and suddenly you've got a portable cooling system. But here's the trick. You're not just cooling food. You're cooling yourself. Wet a towel, drape it over your neck, and place one of those ice packs on your pulse points, wrists, neck, inner thighs. Your body temperature drops fast, and suddenly you're functional again instead of lying on the floor in a stupor. And if you've got medications that need refrigeration, insulin, certain antibiotics, this cooler becomes a life or death piece of equipment. Those medications can't survive in 100-degree heat. Without cooling, they degrade in hours. With a good cooler and rotation of ice packs, you buy yourself days, maybe even weeks depending on how well you manage it. But let's go deeper because ice packs eventually melt, and if the blackout stretches long enough, you're back to square one. That's where evaporative cooling comes in. It's an ancient method, used in desserts for thousands of years, and it still works today. The concept is simple. Water evaporates, and evaporation pulls heat away. You can build a makeshift swamp cooler with a bucket, a fan, and some wet towels. Or if you're really prepared, you've got a battery-powered or solar rechargeable USB fan, the kind that moves serious air, not those toy fans that barely flutter. Pair that fan with damp cloth hung in front of it, and the air coming through drops several degrees. It's not air conditioning, but it's the difference between dangerous heat and survivable discomfort. And in a blackout, survivable is all you need. Here's the reality check. Most people won't think about cooling until they're already overheating. By then, it's too late to improvise. Your thinking is sluggish. Your movements are slow. You're making mistakes, drinking too much water too fast, not recognizing the signs of heat illness until you're on the edge of collapse. The people who make it through summer blackouts are the ones who planned for the heat before it hit. They've got the coolers. They've got the ice packs. They've got the fans and the knowledge to use them. And when the temperature spikes and the grid stays down, they're cool, hydrated, and still in control. Item number 9. Information when the internet dies. When the power goes out, your phone becomes a ticking time bomb. 12 hours, maybe 24 if you're conservative, and that battery is dead. No charging, no internet, no way to know what's happening beyond your street. And that isolation, that information blackout, it's almost as dangerous as the blackout itself. Because you don't know if this is local or national. You don't know if help is coming or if you're on your own. You don't know if it's safe to stay or if you need to move. That's why item number 9 is a hand crank or solar-powered emergency radio. Not a Bluetooth speaker, not a battery-powered AM/FM radio that dies when the AAs run out. A real emergency radio with no weather alerts, multiple charging options, and a built-in flashlight. These radios cost $20 to $40, and they're designed for exactly this scenario. You crank the handle for 60 seconds and you get 10 to 20 minutes of listening time. Or you leave it in the sun and it charges passively all day. No batteries, no outlet, just information when you need it most. And that information, weather alerts, emergency broadcasts, evacuation orders, it's the difference between making smart decisions and stumbling blind into danger. But here's what most people don't understand. In a blackout, rumors spread faster than facts. Your neighbor will swear FEMA trucks are coming tomorrow. Someone else will say the water is contaminated. Another person heard martial law is being declared. Without a reliable information source, you're stuck guessing, and guessing wrong can get you killed. That emergency radio keeps you grounded in reality. It tells you what's actually happening, not what people think is happening. And just as important, it tells you what's not happening. No evacuation order means you stay put. No boil water advisory means your tap, if it's still flowing, is safe. No storm warning means you don't waste energy boarding up windows for weather that isn't coming. This is the power of accurate information in chaos. Now let's talk about power banks, because even though your phone will eventually die, keeping it alive as long as possible buys you options. Texts might still go through. Locally stored maps still work. Your flashlight app, camera, and even offline documents remain accessible. That's where a high-capacity solar power bank comes in. Not the cheap ones that take 3 days to charge a phone. A real one. 20,000 mAh or higher with fast-charging solar panels. Leave it in the sun during the day, and by evening, you've got enough juice to top off your phone, your partner's phone, maybe even a small tablet or headlamp. It's not unlimited power, but it stretches your digital lifeline from 1 day to a week or more. And in a blackout, that extra week could be the difference between staying informed and operating in the dark. Here's the bottom line. When the grid fails, information becomes currency. The person with the working radio, the charged phone, the ability to receive alerts, that person has power. Not electrical power, decision-making power. The power to act while everyone else is frozen in uncertainty. And that power, that edge, it's worth every penny you spent on a $30 radio and a solar charger. Item number 11. The one nobody thinks about until it's too late. Ventilation, not cooling, not climate control, just moving air. Because here's the truth. In a blackout, especially a summer blackout, stagnant air becomes a silent killer. You're sealed in your house trying to keep the heat out, but that also traps the heat in. No airflow, no circulation, just thick, suffocating air that climbs degree by degree until your home becomes an oven. And your body, it can handle heat if air is moving. Sweat evaporates, heat dissipates. You stay functional, but in still air, sweat just sits on your skin. Your core temperature rises, and heat exhaustion turns into heat stroke before you even realize what's happening. This is where item number 11 saves you. A high-powered portable USB fan. Not a desk fan that needs an outlet. Not a battery-powered toy that moves air like a whisper. A real USB fan with a rechargeable battery or solar charging option that pushes serious airflow. These fans cost $15 to $30, and they run for 6 to 10 hours on a single charge. Pair one with your solar power bank, and you've got continuous ventilation as long as the sun keeps rising. Point it at your face while you sleep, and suddenly the heat becomes tolerable. Aim it across a wet towel, and you've got makeshift evaporative cooling. Use it to circulate air through your space, and you prevent that dangerous stagnant heat buildup. But here's what makes this item controversial. Most preppers ignore it. They stack food, water, medical supplies, weapons. But a fan? That seems frivolous, soft, a luxury. Until day 3 of a blackout, when the temperature inside hits 105 degrees and they're lying on the floor unable to move, and they realize that a $20 fan would have kept them functional, alert, and safe. Heat doesn't just kill through stroke. It kills through exhaustion, dehydration, and the mistakes you make when your brain is overheating. You drink water too fast and waste your supply. You make bad decisions like leaving your shelter during the hottest part of the day. You stop thinking clearly, and in survival, unclear thinking is a death sentence. A fan keeps you cool enough to think, cool enough to act, cool enough to survive. And it does it for pocket change compared to what people spend on tactical gear they'll never use. Stack 2 or 3 of these fans, one for each sleeping area, one for your main living space, and keep them charged with your solar setup. Because when the heat is crushing and the power's still out, that little fan spinning next to your head will feel like the greatest prep decision you ever made. Item number 12. The medical kit you actually need, not the one you bought. Let's be blunt. Most first aid kits are useless in a blackout. They're designed for minor cuts and scrapes. a skinned knee, a small burn. The kind of injuries that happen when hospitals are open and ambulances still respond. But in a grid-down scenario, the injuries change. Heat exhaustion, dehydration, infected wounds because you couldn't keep things clean. Medication needs that can't be refilled because pharmacies are closed or looted. This is where 99% of preppers fail. They've got the generic red bag with 200 bandages, some alcohol wipes, and a roll of gauze. Great for a camping trip. Worthless in a real crisis. What you need is a kit focused on the injuries and conditions a blackout actually causes. Start with hydration. Oral rehydration salts, the kind used to treat severe dehydration in disaster zones. They're cheap, shelf-stable, and life-saving. Because in a blackout, especially in heat, dehydration is your #1 threat. Plain water isn't enough when you're sweating out electrolytes. You need sodium, potassium, glucose. ORS packets deliver all three. Next, heat illness treatment. Instant cold packs that activate with a squeeze. These aren't for icing a sore ankle. They're for bringing down a dangerously high core temperature when someone is on the edge of heat stroke. You press them against pulse points, neck, armpits, groin, and you buy time while their body stabilizes. Then there's wound care, not tiny bandages, real trauma supplies, larger gauze pads, medical tape that actually sticks when you're sweating, antibiotic ointment to prevent infections when you can't get to a doctor, butterfly closures or surgical strips to hold wounds shut when stitches aren't an option. Because in a blackout, a cut that would normally need 5 stitches becomes something you have to manage yourself. And if you don't have the right supplies, that cut gets infected, the infection spreads, and suddenly a preventable injury becomes life-threatening. Don't forget medications. Pain relievers, ibuprofen, acetaminophen, anti-diarrheal meds because contaminated water or spoiled food will wreck your gut. Antihistamines for allergic reactions when there's no ER to run to. And if anyone in your household takes prescription meds, especially life-critical ones like insulin, blood pressure medication, or inhalers, you need backups. 30-day supplies minimum. 60 or 90 if you can manage it. Because refills aren't coming when the grid is down. Here's the reality most people avoid. In a prolonged blackout, medical care collapses. Hospitals run on backup generators that eventually run out of fuel. Clinics close. Ambulances stop responding. And suddenly, you're the medic. You're the doctor. You're the pharmacist. The supplies in your kit aren't just helpful. They're the only thing standing between a treatable condition and a tragedy. And if your kit isn't built for the real threats, heat, dehydration, infection, medication gaps, then it's not a survival kit. It's a false sense of security. Build it right, stock it deep, and know how to use every item in it before the lights go out. Because when someone you love is suffering and there's no help coming, that kit becomes everything. Here's what it all comes down to. You've seen the list. 12 items. Nothing exotic. Nothing that requires a security clearance or a trust fund. Just practical, proven gear that keeps you alive when the system stops working. But here's the test. Imagine it's happening right now. The power just died. You've got 60 seconds to grab 3 items from this list before you have to leave your house. No time to think. No time to plan. Just instinct and whatever preparation you've done beforehand. Which 3 would you grab? The water filter because dehydration kills in days? The light source because darkness breaks your mind? The portable stove because hunger makes you weak and stupid? The cooler because heat stroke drops you in hours? The emergency radio because information is control? Or the fan because moving air is the difference between functional and flat on your back? This isn't just a thought exercise. It's a mirror. Your answer tells you what you actually value when survival is on the line. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people would choose wrong. They'd grab sentimental items, photo albums, laptops, things that mattered yesterday but mean nothing when you're 3 days into a blackout with no water, no light, and no plan. The people who make it, the ones who last, they've already answered this question. They've drilled it. They've tested their gear. They know exactly what goes in the bag and what stays behind. And when the moment comes, they're not panicking. They're executing. So here's what I want from you. Drop your answer in the comments below. If you could only take 3 of these 12 items, which ones and why? What's your logic? What did we miss? What would you add? Because this isn't just a video. It's a conversation with people who are actually preparing, not just talking about it. And your answer might give someone else the edge they need when the grid finally fails. Hit subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Real survival. No fluff, no fantasy. Just the gear, the mindset, and the strategies that work when everything else falls apart. And turn on notifications because our next video, we're exposing the 5 fatal mistakes people make in the first 6 hours of a blackout. The decisions that seem smart in the moment but get you killed by day 2. You don't want to miss it. Because survival doesn't start when the lights go out. It starts right now with the choices you make, the gear you stock, and the knowledge you build before you need it. The grid is fragile. The system is vulnerable. And the only question that matters is this: when it fails, will you be ready?